We're going to put you on the hot seat.
All right.
Now, it should be warmed up.
All right.
And you'll see in a minute, we've got a uniquely qualified interlocutor questioner for you. Professor Graham Bodie is one of our unique academics in the School of Journalism. He received his bachelor's and master's degree in communication from Auburn University, his PhD from Purdue. In addition to a decade-long career at LSU, he served as a visiting scholar in the School of Media and Communications at Korea University in Seoul. He's recognized among the top 1% of published scholars in the field of communication study. What's really unique about Dr. Bodie is he is an internationally recognized expert on something we need a heck of a lot more in this country: listening. He's the co-editor of the Handbook of Listening, the first comprehensive and interdisciplinary resource on the topic. Dr. Bodie's work has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Psychology Today, and on NPR, and he serves as, this is a great title, the Chief Listening Officer for Listen First Project, the largest collective impact network of organizations seeking to reduce the harms of toxic polarization. So please welcome to moderate our session with Adam Kinzinger, Professor Graham Bodie.
Thanks, Steve. And thanks for being here, Adam.
Oh, of course.
Before I open my notes, I had two things that you said, just sort of curiosity. One is that you seem to not describe yourself as a Republican from the 16th District of Illinois anymore. Do you describe yourself politically at all, or have you shifted the way you describe yourself politically?
Yeah, it's a tough question for me because I was a Republican congressman for 12 years. Besides some maturing and then, being able to look at things when you kind of escape the bonds of political, parties, you can kind of change your mind on some things. But generally, I'm the same person I was. The party left me. So I haven't voted Republican in 4 years. And I don't ever honestly intend to probably vote Republican again because I think the party has lost the trust of they've lost at least my trust to be able to invest power in them. But I also don't want to give up the title because it really ticks off Donald Trump, and I like that, if I'm being honest.
You mentioned Voice of America, and there was already a card submitted. By the way, this is what they look like if you want to ask Adam a question. What's your advice for those that want to advocate for Voice of America? What's your best advice?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is let's not grow hopeless that this is over, because there will be a new administration in 2.5 years, and all of the stuff that was kind of destroyed will be reassessed, right? You're gonna have a look at USAID and aid programs, all that kind of stuff with the next administration, and it's important that we keep this in the front burner. There's aspects of VOA that I guess still kind of exist. I don't know what the latest is. They were forced to hire back some journalists, but they kind of are operating as a shell. So the best advice I can give is, as you guys are involved in organizations, as you talk to members of Congress or the Senate, as you write or as you speak, occasionally keep bringing this up, because the one thing we don't want people to do is forget that it existed. And we've lost so much ground by it going away. But I think the sooner we can re-implement it, the better. And I think, look, in 20 years, I want VOA to be, and it's a different form. It's not always going to be radio or, whatever. It's internet too. It's all this stuff. But, we saw in the fight with Iran what happens when you lose the information war. Iran crushed us in the information war. And I think it's very important just to keep that in mind. Soft power stops wars. And soft power, VOA is soft power.
Thank you. Questions about trust in journalism are usually framed as technical or professional challenges, but they're also deeply human challenges. They're about how we make sense of the world, like our mission, as you talked about, who we believe, and whether we see ourselves as part of a shared public, able to make decisions together, to come together, in your language, to make decisions together at the local and the national levels. Our symposium was organized to address one of the most pressing challenges, right? Restoring trust in American journalism. We're asked to convene in order to ask what it'll take to rebuild credibility strengthen the role of the free press and civic life. And at the same time, it's clear that journalism is just one of several institutions where public trust has eroded. Government, science, education, and others are all part of that broader story. So I'm curious how you see this landscape. Where does restoring trust in journalism fit within the larger work of rebuilding trust in democratic institutions more broadly?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's tough because when I say we need to rebuild trust in journalism, it's not like you can be like, oh, okay, cool, let's just rebuild it, right? There's obviously, and there's not even really here's an ABC process. We need to write more from the right perspective or from the left perspective. It's not really that either. It's just, I think it's, again, it's being relentlessly committed to telling the truth. Because here's what I really honestly believe, which is that there is going to be a day, and I think it's closer than it may feel like, where people are kind of sick of being spoon-fed their own side of stuff. And you're starting to see this in the younger generation, where they're starting to take ownership again of the information that they hear, that they listen to. Look, if you're on the right and you want to never feel bad, turn on a certain 24-hour news channel, and you can just sit there and be spoon-fed your own opinions. Same with, you could do that on the left or whatever. I think just the commitment to truth, there will be a day when people are like, I'm going to take ownership of my own kind of belief system, and they will seek out the people that have been writing and telling the truth and honesty. So I think it's a long perspective on that. I also think on the broader perspective, where does this fit in? Again, not just because I'm in front of you guys. I think journalism and the media is the cornerstone to rebuilding all of this trust. Because if people feel like they know what's going on, they can make opinions and everything else, I think that gives more faith in all these other institutions to know you're being told the truth. There's not some dark conspiracy, whatever. The other thing, conspiracy theories are out of control. And it's amazing how much that has infected kind of daily thinking. That's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I think it's a long process. But for me, it's just stay committed to truth. And that will reward you in the long run, because there's no other way.
Commitment to truth.
Say that again.
Commitment to truth.
Commitment to truth.
That's your bottom line.
Yep. And look, truth is, we all have different kind of perspectives of the truth, right? Somebody on the left and right may see a true fact slightly differently, and that's all fine. But I think it's staying that commitment is the best advice I can give you. You guys may have way better advice because you know your business more than I do.
Yeah. So it's not a question about commitment to truth. It's a question about maybe how that truth is presented and the allowance or the ability to see nuance within complex issues. I mean, most of the things.
I think so, but I also think it's just, look, I think we have to understand that, again, all of this kind of like, quote unquote, fake news that's out there, conspiracy theories, I really think that's going to retro away at some point. Right now, it's kind of at this height. I think people feel broken. How many of you know friends that all feel depressed right? There are more depressed people in this country than I think there's ever been. And I think part of that is people feel unmoored. They don't know what to believe. And I think be there as the pillar of consistency and truth, and people will come back to that. I hope.
Yeah. You express a lot of hope and a lot of optimism in your speech and a lot of the things that I was able to see on your website. So I'm going to go out of my order a little bit. And that's one thing I find compelling about your Country First project is emphasis on building common ground, bringing people together across difference. At the same time, some of that language, like joining the fight for democracy, has a more adversarial tone, a kind of moral battle that can feel like it draws a line between the very dynamic of us versus them that this pro-democracy movement is seeking to disrupt. How do you think about that balance? Can a movement both rally people with urgency and still create space for the kind of bridge building it ultimately hopes to achieve?
Yeah, so look, I believe that within I'll just call it the pro-democracy coalition. Let's use Hungary as an example. So Peter Magyar, who just won, he's a right-winger. Like, he's on the right. The left came together with the center, with the sane right, to vote for Magyar because they said this is how we can win against Viktor Orban. And the most important thing for them was getting rid of the Orban regime. All the disagreements on policy pale in comparison to, do we have the ability to disagree on policy at all, right? And that's why I'm so passionate about the pro-democracy coalition. is because we're all going to have differences. I'm married and I have differences, right, with my wife on opinions and stuff. That's good. That's normal. That's healthy. And so I want to create the bridges within that gap. But where I want to fight and where there is no common ground is with illiberalism. I have no common cause with somebody that doesn't believe in democracy or believes that their version of democracy is some of what we've seen in like Hungary or whatever. I have no desire, if I'm being completely honest, to understand them, to find commonality. My interest is in crushing them politically, making sure that that is gone and never brought up again, which is why I also am pretty aggressive about what needs to happen on day one of the next presidency. So commonality within those people that support democracy and support the system, hardcore battle against those that don't, because that is a actual existential threat. A different tax rate is not threatening to me.
Got it. Thank you. So there's a lot of research that suggests that while trust in journalism has been declining for decades, it's not like all of a sudden we woke up and no one trusted the news media. The Trump era certainly accelerated that decline, particularly among Republicans and independents, due in part to the perception of overwhelmingly negative coverage and a focus on personality over policy. At the same time, others would argue that this kind of coverage was a response to the moment, necessary for accountability, as you say, sort of, right, picking your political battles and making them sort of just and justifiable. So I'm curious where you come down on this, and I wonder how that connects to your own work. Your leadership and the work of Country First are very strongly associated with criticism of Trump. So how do you navigate that challenge of building common ground when the framing might feel exclusionary to a third, a half, 40% of some sort of Americans?
It's a great question. You know, part of the difficulty is and I'm not just here to pick on the right, but I've got to use them as an example here. Since the 80s or 90s, you think of like the introduction of Rush Limbaugh and some of that, the media has been framed as the enemy. Why? Because if there's a bad story, well, some of the mainstream media tilted a little more left. I don't think anybody can really doubt that. And so a tiny bit of criticism maybe for that. But the reality is, media is like Congress. If you ask somebody, do you approve of Congress? 15% of people say yes. If you ask, do you approve of your congressman? It's 50 or 60%, because you're now putting a name on it versus a faceless institution. When you talk about the media, it's a faceless institution. And so any bad thing you've ever thought about the media, it gets crammed into this. Not, Jim Carlson at the local daily paper, who maybe you do like. And so I think that's one thing, is for 40 years, this has been jammed into people's head that the media is the enemy. And I think that's a big problem. Secondarily, I think with Trump, that's a good question, because what he does, if I'm just being honest, what he does every day is unprecedented and unreal and deserves the kind of coverage it gets. But Trump himself is very good at saying all these people have Trump derangement syndrome, right? They all have TDS. Well, you just started a war without talking to anybody. That's not TDS. That's just like, you don't do that. And so I ultimately, that's a question for you guys to answer. I would say this: be committed to the truth. If there's something that's going on that's crazy, talk about it. We can't get fatigued. This is the problem is, for instance, in the Trump administration, there is so much corruption that we don't cover it anymore. We don't talk about it because people are like, whatever, it's corruption. We're so numb and so used to it. And I think we have to guard against that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's a balance between, don't be hysterical, but be factual, right? About what's going on when it violates norms. And that's about all you can do.
Yeah, so
but they are going to turn you into the enemy, because that is the business model.
So advice for journalists, I hear, stick to the truth, right, which seems to be a theme. Be unrelentless when it comes, to that principle. I also heard sort of, it's interesting, research backs this up as well, is when you think of sort of amorphous, nebulous institutions, the Republicans or the Democrats or the whatever, it's very much polarized. But when you go, more local, or more personal, it becomes a whole lot less polarized. So that may be also some advice to journalists. What other advice do you have for journalists as they approach this tension between like telling the truth, but not trying to insert language that really like sets off a certain percentage of Americans and like causes us to turn off or to throw down our newspaper. Like again, how do journalists in particular maybe balance that tension?
I mean, it's a tough question for me to answer. I would say this, like, first off, understand that there are people that you're not going to turn. Okay. Understand that. It's like in politics. I eventually had to come to my own understanding that there are going to be people out there that don't like me. And that's hard for politicians because we're kind of like people pleasers. We want everybody to like us. You come to the understanding that there will be a group of people that aren't going to like you. And when you accept that, then you can do your job better, because then you can take the votes you really want to take because you're not fearful, right? You can say what you really want to say because you're not fearful. I think the best thing for media and for journalists is don't be fearful. Don't be intimidated. Don't let somebody's dislike for you or maybe a low approval rating for media make you shy away from the truth. Don't let, the owner, I don't know, because this may actually apply to some in here, I don't know, but like, the owner is a supporter of a certain political candidate. Well, don't be intimidated. So that's easier for me to say than done, actually. Because I honestly think if you just commit to doing your job, doing it as best you can, that is literally all you can control. I don't think there's something you can write or a news item that you can say or give that is going to change the perception. I don't think it's like you should write your story a little differently by, putting this in the opening paragraph. I think it's literally just you have to just focus on I don't know, writing the best you can, doing it the right way, being as fair as you can, and not being intimidated. People can read when you're intimidated, by the way, I think, for anybody. And that's all I can give. I think you're writing fine, right? Like your writing is good. It's just don't be intimidated.
So we have
I'm trying to get anybody fired though. So
yeah,
don't follow my
only
advice.
take this advice if it doesn't get you fired.
Yeah, if it doesn't get you fired.
Truth, don't get fired. Sort of like whenever
Right.
number two. One of our students asked a question similar, so I'll phrase it this way. You've had a front row seat to the relationship of, the between politicians and the press, especially during a time of intense polarization. When you were in office, how did you think about engaging the media strategically? And did your experiences, particularly being in the crosshairs at times, change your own level of trust in journalism?
That's a really good question. Look, it's a love-hate with the media when you're in politics, and it honestly should be. The love side of it is politicians need the media. I had a strategy of earned media. When I would go home to my district, I'd travel around. We'd make sure we hit the certain factory in the town that had the local paper so that the paper could cover it. We'd get pissed if they didn't cover it, or I'd go, and so we had that strategy because I wanted as many people as possible to see, because I had a district that was huge. I wanted as many people as possible to see I was just in their local town. And that makes a big difference. Oh, Kinzinger was at our town of 3,000 people, right? That makes a difference. So that's the love part of it. And, or a press release goes out, or you take a vote and you do an interview, right? That is essential. So politicians need the media like they need air. On the other hand, the hate side is sometimes we would get that call, right? The call of, hey, one of Adam Kinzinger's friends in Congress just got indicted for corruption. What does Adam know about that? Was he close to him? Those kinds of calls come in. And then you're just like, I hate these guys, right? Like they're going to write, doesn't matter what I say. They're already going to have their story. Or it would be like I would take a tough vote, a vote that may be against the interest of a community in my district, but it was like a moral vote or whatever. You would have to answer to that. So it's love-hate, but I always thought about my strategy personally as how do I develop the best relationships I can? If there was a bad story written, I would try to kind of put it out of my mind, because one thing you didn't want to do is to freeze out, obviously, news organizations. And so that played an essential role for me. During the January 6th stuff, it was crazy. Every time I'd leave my office, you're inundated by media, right? And so I would have to strategically make a decision to say nothing, or if I said something, you have to think through in those sound bites and everything else. But that's all important to get that messaging out. So it's literally like It's probably like a marriage. Sometimes you're on each other's nerves and sometimes you need each other. I think that's important. Was there a second part to that question I missed, or was that generally it?
I mean, I think if there is a second part, it's, what do you think journalists themselves need to hear right now, as they deal with politicians, as they deal with whether those politicians are, in their camp or not in their camp, depending on their political views, or as they're, talking about, contentious issues or happy stories. I mean, journalists cover all kinds of politicians. We have somebody who spent, a decade in Congress. So, what do you need? What would you say in terms of, from your vantage point, what do they need to be doing, right? Both to keep that relationship, open, not shut it down, but also not just sort of capitulate to,
the talking points.
Yeah.
Follow-up questions. I ask follow-up questions. I'm a politician, so I can tell you all the tricks. You know what? You just mentioned the factory that Doge shut down this thing which affected the local factory. I didn't know about that. Let me take a deep look at that one, right? I don't know. We're going to have a discussion. I'm very concerned about that. I might even put out a tweet saying I'm concerned about it. There's so many things that we learn to do to punt, right? And you guys all know it when we're punting. You understand it. Follow-up questions. Okay, what do you mean you're going to take a deep look? Does that mean do you have somebody that's going to get to that and will get back to me today on that? Or, okay, so you're concerned. So, Congressman, respectfully, are you willing to send a letter to the president? Or are you willing to vote against this thing that comes up? Politicians hate follow-up questions, and follow-up questions are effective at actually getting to the truth. Let's say the president does something and, okay, he goes after the Pope, right? Hypothetically. And
just for instance.
Yeah, he would never do this, but he goes after the Pope. You ask your local congressman. He's like, well, I don't think he should go after the Pope. Okay, are you going to put out a statement condemning him for going after the Pope? Or if he puts out a statement, is it a statement that says Donald Trump has been ill-advised? I'm going to attack the people that advise him and not attack him. I mean, like Ukraine. I'm a huge Ukraine fan. And the number of congressmen in the Republican Party that put out tweets that they are upset that we cut off aid to Ukraine because Donald Trump obviously has been ill-advised by the people around him. No, Donald Trump is the president. He makes these decisions. That's my advice.
Yeah, so holding them accountable.
Hold them accountable, ask questions so they cut you off, but be fair about it, obviously. If it appears to be an ambush, that's when you can create a tougher relationship. But, just fairly, because I want to write this story fairly, Congressman. You're concerned. What does that look like? What do you mean by that? What can we expect to hear from you?
One more question from the audience. At last year's Jordan Senator Symposium, the speaker said there were over 100 fake local news websites. Does our government have a role in combating this? What should our government do? What should politicians do about these kinds of fake websites?
I mean, constitutionally, nothing. There's nothing. What we need to have this is another one, a deep conversation about. Now, what we really do have to grapple with, though, is and the whole, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's not a real standard, but, it's something.
Sounds good, though.
Yeah. But I think as a country, we really do need to grapple with that question. How do you handle fake news? Can you shut down a website because it has fake news? Probably not constitutionally. But can there be requirements to label? Can there be services that people trust? And this is the problem. Even fact checkers, the people that have an interest in not being fact checked claim the fact checkers are funded by George Soros or whoever, right? But if there was a way to have like a source that could just, call out that misinformation. But here's where I think the good news is again, I feel like that people within the next 10 years, which is a long time, but not really, people are going to start taking ownership of what information they take in. So it's not like now I'm just going to sit and watch what's fed to me and believe it all. I think there's been so much kind of confusion and depression and craziness out there that people are going to start saying, let me actually find out what's true. And they may do their own research, but for real. And, but yeah, I mean, we have a First Amendment in this country, which is a very great thing, but also comes with real challenges. You know, here's one other thing I'll say is one area that it can be, and it's not really a government thing, is like through lawsuits. $780 million judgment against Fox News after January 6th, right? That's important. Now, I don't think we need to get into the frivolous lawsuit game. I hate the frivolous lawsuits. By the way, my former party is the frivolous lawsuit king now. And we used to be all for tort reform. Remember that back in 5 minutes ago? And now we sue anybody that says anything mean. But if you really have a situation where a media organization is spreading the falsities like you saw after the election, that's probably one way to hold some accountable.
Thank you for steering us a little bit more optimistic. The last question is in that direction, both because I think it's important and because that seems to be where your head goes. And so I really do appreciate we're not going to just mire in all the negativity today. We're going to maybe bring up some and all the way back in when you talk about what drew you to the Republican Party, you talked about optimism in 4 areas of your leaders, that America's best days are ahead of us, that we're a beacon of hope for the rest of the world, and that we can accomplish anything when we come together. And I heard a lot of those elements in your talk today as well. So the question is, what role does optimism play in strengthening our democracy? And does it have a place in journalism? In other words, can journalism help cultivate the kind of forward-looking vision without losing its critical edge?
Yeah, I think so. Again, I can't tell you how to do your job, but I think, you know, it's one of the reasons I'm so I stress the local angle so much is like, there is good news in the local paper, right? There is good news on the local radio or local television. I think that is some optimism. You know, every time, I don't know if you're ever scrolling through like Instagram or something and you see a good story and you find yourself teared up. I tear up easily, as you guys can tell, but you find yourself teared up and you're like, why am I, you know, tearing up about somebody that started to go fund me for an old guy? It's like, well, because we are kind of starving of that good feeling, of that optimism, of that reminder that we are looking out for each other. And I think from a journalistic perspective, being able to put that stuff out there is really essential to restoring the optimism. That doesn't mean you have to write an op-ed that says America's best days are ahead of it. It doesn't mean you have to pretend like a bad thing that's happening isn't happening, because that's how you lose your credibility. But it's like focusing on those good side of things, I think, is important. For me, look, I think optimism it's essential because we are starving for a vision. I mean, how long has it been since a leader, a president, has actually painted out a 10-year in the future vision that was like income inequality, while it will always be there, will not be as egregious as it is now. People that don't have access to healthcare will have access to healthcare. You know, I foresee a future where we'll never get out of debt. We'll never even balance the budget, but we can get our budget in a healthier spot where it can be maintained better, where our troops are taken care of, but not sent into, you know, wars unnecessarily. Like painting a positive vision, like, man, we should have flying cars someday. That's pretty cool. Like all of that, I think without that vision and without that optimism, we may as well hang it up, because otherwise we're just managing our misery. And what's even the point at that point? Why would you want to write about managing our misery? I would not want to be doing this job if it was just about managing misery. People can be rallied to do awesome things, but they've got to be shown that vision, because we don't come up with it on our own.
Awesome. Adam Kinzinger, former Republican, ever optimist, champion of trust in news, and friend of the media. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Graham.